Snow falling on Cedars. It feels like it's been a long time, but it's only been a week. But a week ago it was snowing, and now it's nice and warm and sunny. So that's a nice difference. So I've actually been pretty excited about this class because I think right at this point the book really starts getting into some interesting aspects of the characters and what's going on with the characters, with the town. So before I start, does anybody have any questions, observations, anything that they want before I start jabbering away? No? So you want me to jabber away, is what you're saying? Okay. All righty. Okay, we'll take a look at our question list. Let's go to, let's see. Um, 11, 12, 13. Okay. The first obvious question, what do you think it might have been like to have been Japanese and learn about the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Nervous. Yeah. Okay. Have you ever, I don't know if you were part of a religion or an ethnic group or a fan, a fan of a team. I don't know, whatever group you might be part of, but have you ever been part of a group and somebody in that group acts really inappropriately and makes you worry about how they represent you? I mean, one thing that's really jumps out is like the problem with Islam right now, right? So there are some people who claim to be representing Islam and they're doing these terrible things, and people who are Muslims are really upset about this because they're saying they do not represent what we believe. And it's very hard because some people are taking out their frustrations on all Islam, all Muslims, or when somebody does something and they claim it's because of their religion or their country or whatever it is, and if you're from that group of people, you're embarrassed. Is that something you can relate to?
Yeah.
Yeah? Because imagine, that was you guys, none of, but how old are you guys? About 17, 19? So you were 2, 3 years old when 9/11 happened. So you don't remember that, clearly. So that's my recollection, is that real feeling of fear that everybody was gripped with when that happened, because we had never seen, most people at that time had never seen anything like that in their lifetime other than people who'd been alive during this time. So it's a very scary time, and I think when you're scared, do you act rationally?
No.
Do you think?
Emotion affects your thinking.
Very good. Emotion affects your thinking. You're acting on emotion, okay? It's actually scientifically demonstrated with the biology of the brain. When you have reactions, they actually have to pass through the more primitive side of your brain before they get to the thinking side of your brain, which is a good way in some ways, because when you put your hand down on a hot fire, okay, you'd rather have the instinctive part of your brain connected first and then the thinking part, because the instinct, you just go like this, because if it was reversed, you'd be like, you'd think first like, my goodness, that smells delicious, but it's also very hot. Oh, I'm burning, okay? So fear, it has its place, but sometimes when we are fearful, we act irrationally and cruelly. So I think it's never happened to any of us. I've seen it indirectly in my life, but not as intensely as this, where these people are in a community. They're not treated as equals already, and now this happens. Okay. Okay. Ishmael's dad and his editorials. We talked about characterization and how you can describe somebody or have an author describe a character to you. Or you can learn about a person from how they speak, how they act. What does Ishmael's father and his editorial after World War II tell us about him? And if you don't, does anybody remember the editorial? Do you remember what he said?
Ishmael said something about how he wanted his father to just present the facts and not any opinions. And then his father said that there were no clear facts.
Very interesting. His father, Ishmael's like, why don't you just present the facts? And he says, well, which facts? You know, how clearly do you want to present this? Because you could present some facts, but Ishmael's father was very sensitive. He knew. It shows that he knows human nature. And he's in his editorial. Now, is an editorial facts? Are editorials facts in the newspaper? Anybody know what an editorial is? Who writes it, do you think?
The journalist.
Okay, well think of it. The editorial.
Editor.
The editor, okay? And it's that part of the paper, the editorial section, is where they can introduce opinions. They can kind of step out from behind the story and say, well, this is what we think, or I think, if it's one editor. And he makes clear that there's a difference between these people who are our friends and neighbors and the people who did this. Okay? What do they have in common? What do the people who bombed Pearl Harbor have in common with them? Really?
They're Japanese.
Yeah, the way they look, right? And maybe some cultural traditions and things like that. But these are our friends and neighbors that we know, okay? And his father in the editorial makes it clear that we've got to be careful about equating the two. Also, in the facts, when he's talking about the facts, before that editorial, he does give some facts, and at the end of that story, and this is on page, let's see. Looking for it. Well, he says, Japanese leaders here pledge loyalty to America. And then he talks about the Japanese Chamber of Commerce, the Japanese American Citizens League, and all of these people promptly stepping forward and pledging their loyalty, okay? So he wants to he's really trying to head this off and say, remember, these are our friends, our neighbors, fellow citizens, and he's trying to, and his son is watching. Anybody here have a younger brother or sister, or maybe babysit or anything like that? Younger people watch. See what you do. You can tell someone, a parent can say, don't ever smoke, and then they smoke cigarettes. Well, what is the kid going to pick up on? What will they copy? Yeah, they'll watch what you're doing. That's one of the oldest sayings. Actions speak louder than words. Hatsu says to Ishmael that the war won't hurt their relationship. The question is this in character for Hatsu? Why? Why do you say no?
Because she's been taught to follow Japanese culture from her mother and to be loyal to her mother and her parents.
Right, her mother, and she also had another teacher, am I right, and who taught her some things. The thing about Hatsu, too, is she's very honest and direct, and this is the beginning of, if you've read the whole section, where she's having this internal struggle, okay? You've been taught about conflict, right? Internal conflict, external conflict, okay? External conflict is man, woman versus woman, man. Internal is against yourself, okay? External conflict, the environment, okay? Internal conflict, it's yourself. And she's having this internal conflict, and you might be able to relate to this where you've known something in your heart or in your mind, but you don't want it to be true, so you just keep saying the opposite, right? And so I think that's part of, so it says, is it part of her character? I agree that it's not, but at the same time I think it is. It's kind of a paradox because she wants that to be true. She wants their relationship to remain unaffected by what's going on around them. Okay, we talked about the facts. At the end of the chapter, I believe, what happens with Arthur, who is Ishmael's father, the editor of the newspaper? What starts to happen after he starts printing his version of the facts? Let's put it that way.
People are starting to unsubscribe from his paper.
Right, people are unsubscribing from his paper. He's getting nasty notes and phone calls. So does he say, "Oh boy, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to lose customers. I don't want trouble." So does he back down? No. Again, teaching that lesson to his son about doing the right thing. Okay? Would it make sense to you if maybe he toned it down a little bit because he was losing business or he was worried for his own safety? I mean, I'm not saying is it right, but does it make sense if somebody's afraid?
Yeah.
Okay? So there's courage, but it's in a very quiet, subtle way that his father shows he's just going to be steadfast and not give in to the hysteria that's going on around them. Okay. Right, let's move on to chapter 14. This was tough to read. The FBI search. The FBI search. I wrote down some stuff in here. Let me, any reactions before I say anything? If you remember the FBI search of their home.
It's unfair.
Unfair? I mean, I don't know if anybody here owns their own home or apartment yet. No? Okay, you have your own room. Okay? How do you feel about someone going into your room and just going through your things? No? How do you feel? I mean, what are your feelings? Somebody just walks in and just starts going through your stuff.
You feel violated.
Yeah. You feel violated.
It drives me nuts. My little brother does it all the time.
Even if it's like it's somebody in your own family. I've got three boys, and they do not like people going through their Legos or whatever it is. Okay, but this is a lot more serious than Legos. Well, I don't know, my sons might disagree, but this is more serious than Legos. And the way they talk to them, the way they talk to the family, the FBI agents, what was the sense, what I would call the tone of the words they were using, the attitude? It seemed, let me ask you this, does it seem nice at first? I mean, they're saying things like, we've been asked to search this place, you understand, we're going to search. Now, if you'll just inside, please, we'll all sit down. Okay, you're real polite. We're going to search the premises. It's an order, see? An order. Okay? Are they rude or aren't they? It's a tricky question. I don't mean it as a trick question, but it's a tricky question. Can somebody be rude to you without saying anything rude?
Yeah.
How?
Like the way they speak to you, because like the way they're talking to them,
Yeah.
they're talking to them like they're slow, like they
Awesome.
don't understand.
Yes, yes. Talking to them like they're children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a grown man, and his wife, and and it's humiliating. I mean, I don't think anybody in here has their own family yet, right? Okay, but imagine, like, that's humiliating in front of your family. Someone to treat you like that in your own home. So there's that humiliation and the kind of I love it. Like, they're slow and it's very condescending. And there's some words that the author uses at the beginning with the magazines. And at the bottom of page 194 there, it says, he pawed through the magazines there. He pawed through the magazines. That's an interesting choice of words to describe the FBI agent. What is he being compared to? An animal. Just going through your magazines. Okay. And then he says, we've had complaints from local citizens that certain enemy aliens on San Pedro Island have in their possession items declared illegal contraband. Okay? How would you like to be called an enemy alien? Would you like that?
No, that wouldn't be nice.
2 words. It's not like peanut butter cups where chocolate and peanut butter go good together. No, you don't like it? You don't like Reese's? Next Thanksgiving, Halloween, when you get some, I'll take them. All right. So, but enemy alien is like what's missing there is a human being. Those 2 words and that's very common when you talk about propaganda, you study the history of genocide. All of those things start with the dehumanization of other people. You start calling them things like rats and bugs and alien. Okay? Because why do you think it might be a strategy to talk about human beings without making them human? To call them rats, bugs, alien. What makes it easier to do when you do that?
They try to make themselves not feel as bad for talking that way, because they're not referring to them as people, they're referring to them as things.
Excellent. It takes that away, right? It's easier to treat a rat poorly, right? A bug. So we're going to use that kind of language. Enemy aliens. And then later on there, he starts going through things, and he says, I hope you won't mind. Okay, and I wrote down it's his words versus his actions. Okay, he says, I hope you won't mind. Does he? No. Then page 196. Again, I notice, and maybe you can speak to this, the agent yells, Wilson, get your paws off the underwear. So he's going through, clearly, the women's underwear drawer, which I don't know. I don't know if that times have changed and people are more sensitive to that kind of thing. Or do you think that that's really embarrassing and rude? What, thoughts?
Pretty rude.
Rude. And imagine you're the child and somebody's doing that to your mom.
It just seems unnecessary to need
Mhm.
to go through it.
So it's unnecessary, but what it does is it makes you feel even lower, doesn't it? The word I was thinking of as I'm reading this over was dignity, taking someone's dignity away. And the word choice is get your paws off the underwear. Now the first time the word paws was used was by the author describing his action. Now the agent actually uses the word paws. So it's even more creepy, I think. And then, of course, then they arrest him. Okay. Fujiko is the mom. And there's a long description here, 199 into 200, and there were a couple things I noticed. I don't know if you picked up anything. Let's get a sense of what you thought of her mom. Her mom's a very complicated character, and I think as you go through the book, you might think one way about her, and then as you see more, it starts to make sense. I'm not saying you would agree with everything she did, but some of the things she says and does make sense in the broader sense of her life. Impressions of her? Do you admire her? Do you not admire her? I'll add a couple. Imagine this, you have 5 daughters to take care of.
I don't really understand
You don't understand her?
it. No, because there was like, I found the sentence I was looking for.
Yeah. Page? Give me a page.
199.
Okay.
She knew what it was to be alive without being alive.
Hey, look at that. Look
She
at
knew
that.
it was to be invisible. I didn't understand that
Oh,
sentence.
okay, good. All right, that's the one. On page 199, I underlined it. Yeah, because it jumped out at me too. Hey. It's on 199. She knew what it was to be alive without being alive. To get more of that, what you need to do is go a little, look at beforehand, okay? And I think when we go through it, it'll make more sense. What kind of work did she have to do on that ship?
She cleaned like shitty or crappy like vomit and blood and
Vomit, blood of whom?
Yeah.
Of whom? What kind of people?
non-Japanese,
Right.
white and of white men.
Yeah. Who have money.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like if you've ever had a job where you're the low person. Like I was a caddy once at a really ritzy country club for a while, and I washed dishes there. I don't know if you've ever had a job where you're the low person, and how there are some people, not all, but some people who really don't treat you with respect. It's like if you wear a paper hat somehow, you're not a human being all of a sudden. So she has to go do this degrading work. And before that, 2 sentences before that, it says, they looked right through her. I remember I used to work as a third shift janitor, and I spent the nights from 11 at night until 8 in the morning cleaning super Stop and Shops. And one day, like this woman, not like, I hate this woman comes in with her daughter, and the daughter said, hi, and she said, don't talk to that man. He's the janitor. Or people would come in and not talk to me politely or respectfully because I had a mop in my hand and I was cleaning, and I was cleaning toilets and cleaning fish guts in the butcher section and all that other mess that you find in a grocery store at night. People, there's a lot of gum on the floor, believe it or not. Lots of chewing. People put, I don't know why. But so what she means when she says to be alive without being alive, you're just existing. You're not, you know when you're really happy and life is going great and you're with your friends, that's what you feel alive, right? But there are other times when you're not being treated with respect, your dignity, and again that word, she wanted her daughters to have dignity a couple sentences after that. You picked a really good one because it's right in the heart of this. She wants her daughters to have dignity because she knows what it's like to not have it. And so that feeling of being alive without not being with, you know, I've had, I think some, like you're saying, it seems like a lot of you have had that. I've had the job with the paper hat and, you know, in the food play, the amusement park or whatever, where people just did not treat me well, okay? And so she had to endure that, but she did it for her family. And she wants now not to kind of protect them from that. And let's see, if we go to page 200, it talks about a trick. The trick was to live here without hating yourself because all around you was hatred. She feels the hatred coming towards her and her family. And I don't mean to be biased in a gender sort of way, but I think moms feel a real sense of protection about, you know, and so when you feel that, not only do you feel it coming towards yourself, but you want to protect your children. So she's feeling that, but she's also saying, I'm not going to absorb that hatred. Okay? I'm going to try, and I'm trying to keep my dignity. The trick was to refuse to allow your pain to prevent you from living honorably. And do we notice that there's a couple times where she has some very difficult conversations, and maybe we'll have time to get to those tonight, but she maintains her composure, although privately she loses it a couple, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the mom loses it, gets really mad, but then she brings it together. Hatsu, I can see you were upset. To persevere was always a reflection of the state of one's inner life, one's philosophy, and one's perspective. It was best to accept old age, death, injustice, hardship. All of these were part of living. Only a foolish girl would deny this was so, and thus reveal to the world her immaturity and the degree which she lived in the world of the Hakujin instead of in the world of her own people. So, kind of basically saying that American culture is very tumultuous, hateful, and I'm not saying that that's what I'm stating that as a fact. I think that's her experience as a Japanese American at that time, and her culture has taught her inner peace, focus, and perspective. And she's trying to maintain that not only for herself, but more so for her daughters. Okay. And then she lectures Hatsu. They argue. And Fujiko says, the whites you see are tempted by their egos and have no means to resist. We Japanese, on the other hand, know our egos are nothing. We bend our egos all of the time. And that is where we differ. That is the fundamental difference, Hatsu. We bend our heads, we bow and are silent because we understand that by ourselves alone we are nothing at all, dust in a strong wind. While the Hakujin believes his aloneness is everything. His separateness is the foundation of his existence. He seeks and grasps for his separateness, while we seek union with the greater life. You must see that these are distinct paths we are traveling, Hatsu, the Hakujin, and we Japanese. So there's some poetic element to that, but is Hatsu buying it? If you look at that section on page 201, Are they agreeing? Is Hatsu agreeing with her mother? No, she's pushing back. She's pushing back. And she's making a very mature point, which is what about human beings? It's more actually on page 200 down here. What'd she say to her mother when her mother says, we're Japanese, we're superior in many ways, they are all these things? Hatsu's pointing out something to her mother.
That not everybody is.
Not everybody's that way. They are not so different from us. And she's saying, and then she gives her mom, she gives her mom the old, she says, oh, these people you talk about with the greater life, these superior people, they bombed Pearl Harbor, right? Is that the superior people you're talking about? Very, very clever. And if they're ready to bend and bow, then what are they doing? Attacking all over the world and taking over other countries. Okay? So, what you might have noticed is her mom doesn't address that point. She moves on to another point. I don't know if that's ever happened to you in an argument when you make a good point and people change the subject. Okay? And then, so we have this thing, and it's very interesting in this exchange because Hatsu and her mother having this discussion, it's very important. And her mother makes some good points, but there is a racial aspect that's kind of prejudiced one way. And Hatsu pushes back and shows that she's mature, maybe more mature in some sense than her mom. But then her mom says, you are Japanese, but I don't, when a parent says, end of discussion. You're Japanese. Why are we talking about it? You're Japanese, the end. Okay? Which is not a very mature way. And so what Hatsu does is she reminds us that she's a very young girl when she says, I hate being Japanese. I don't want to be Japanese. Okay? It's kind of like, I wish I never was born kind of level we're at now. So that's not helping. But the mom doesn't get mad. I thought when she said that I don't want to be Japanese, then her mom would lose it. Her mom actually does the opposite. She says, I can see you're angry. You don't know what you're saying. So then it gets a little more messy on page 202. This is a really neat chapter. On page 200, her mom says, the Hakujin has tainted you. By the way, when we say Hakujin, what are we talking about? White Americans,
Yeah.
right? Okay. And then she says, made your soul impure. This lack of purity envelops you. I see it every day. And then further on it says, I cannot translate all of this easily except as the impurity that comes with living each day around white people. And then, you are 18, you're grown up, I can't walk with you where you are going anymore. You walk alone soon, Hatsu. I hope you will carry your purity with you always and remember the truth of who you are. Uh-oh. At that moment, Hatsu has what you'd call a moment of realization. It's on page 202. When her mom says those things, and she says, you've lost your purity. I know that has happened. What does Hatsu realize about her mother and what's been going on for the past few months? Page 202. She knows. She realizes all this elaborate thing where she says, oh, I was here and I was gathering plants. And she thought she was pulling the wool over her mom's eyes, and her mom knew all along. Which is, by the way, usually how the case is, by the way. Parents usually know, teachers know all along. Okay? Moms usually don't ask questions they don't already know the answer to. I don't know if that's been your experience. But now her mother seemed to know the truth. So that is out there, and Hatsu is now, she's torn, because I think no matter how angry one is with parents and where they come from, whether it's a religious or cultural, you're still tied to that, if that makes any sense. You still are a member of that family, that group. You can't completely say, I'm done forever. So she's torn. You see that, right? She has her feelings for Ishmael, but she has this whole part of who she is racially, culturally, part of her family. She feels like she's now being forced to choose between the two. After this conversation with her mother, even though she seems to reject what her mother says internally, then they go back to the cedar tree. Have things changed now between Hatsu and Ishmael? You say yes. Why? What do you say?
Well, they haven't changed yet, but in Hatsu's mind, they've changed because she needs to shut out Ishmael now.
In her mind, something has changed, and she's feeling, and she starts to think. She's very mature. Do you know what she reminds me of? One of my favorite teenage female characters is Juliet. I don't know if you remember Romeo and Juliet, but Juliet thinks things through. Okay, except for the suicide part, but everything else, she thinks things through. Unlike Romeo, who's like jump, just react. Okay? She thinks it through, and she logically thinks through what is going to happen with Ishmael. Do you remember that? In the next year or two? Does anybody remember what she thinks is going to be happening with Ishmael in the next few months, years? Drafted, and therefore not with her. Where's he going to be? Japan, doing, or somewhere in the war, doing what?
Fighting America. Fighting Japanese.
Right, and if fighting, and not only fighting, but killing. And it's all coming around. She says he's going to be killing, the word she uses, people of her blood. And again, that might, depending on your personal background, having a tie to a racial or cultural, religious group can be very, very deep. And that sense of loyalty, and now her mom has planted that in her head. Like, you're Japanese. That's my argument. That's the mother's final argument, isn't it? You're Japanese. And so, this is, let's go to, it's on page 203 as she's walking into the woods there. And there's a couple things I want to ask folks here, and this is again, hard stuff. It says, their love had come out of thoughtlessness and impulse. She had fallen into loving him long before she knew herself, although it occurred to her now that she might never know herself, that perhaps no one ever does, that such a thing might not be possible. And she thought she, page 206, understood what she had long sought to understand, that she concealed her love for Ishmael Chambers not because she was Japanese in her heart, but because she could not, in truth, profess to the world that what she felt for him was love at all. This is really messy. What is she starting to question?
Does she really love him?
Does she love him? And I'm not the love doctor, I'm the English doctor. love doctor's in the next room, I think. He's in another class. But I don't know. I'm thinking if you start to think that way, you're in trouble already. Am I don't know if I love this person. Oh, well, there you, am I right? Yes? Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm not an expert on that kind of. To me, in the moment in this book where she says, I'm not sure, we're in trouble. Okay. And then a little further down there, she feels she's going back and forth still. Ishmael is a part of her, but she says no, she'd merely followed her instincts, and instincts did not make the kinds of distinctions having Japanese blood demanded. She didn't know what else love could be. So, I don't know. It feels like she's starting to waver. And if you remember how Ishmael, she starts talking to him, and it says she brought this matter up with Ishmael. Yikes. I don't know if I love you. We don't get that part of the conversation. How does he react? Let me give away my punchline here. If you go to page 207, look at the bottom right hand of the page, 207, bottom right hand. It's really interesting the way it's placed physically in the book, that line. You all see that? What's really clear right there?
Ishmael loves her.
Ishmael loves her, right? I love you. I'll always love you. I don't care what happens. I'm always going to love you, right? Okay. What's really neat is now turn the page and look at the top of the page. What would you be expecting to see? I love you too, right? That's right. You turn the page. She says, I know you do. That's like one step above, we'll always be friends. Right? So, I'm trying to be realistic about this. And I think he's just flailing at this point. Love is the strongest thing. Nothing can touch it. We're in love, right? And he's speaking with confidence and drama. And that's it. We don't have much. I'm just going to address, let's just talk about the rest of the chapter. Because this, once again, it deals with some sensitive stuff here, right? I'm not going to get into the details. We don't need to, am I correct? Of this, the rest of the chapter. But it's important to address it, right? Something happens between the two of them in the tree. Do you think that helped or hurt things? And I don't have an answer in my back pocket that I think is the answer. So what do you think? You think it hurt things? Hurt things? What happened there in the tree right before they separated? Hurt things, help things? Let me ask you that, too. Do you feel it? As I'm it's funny, you reread this a few times and you start to think different things. Do you think it was her choice? It really depends on how you read it. I'd encourage you to reread that section. Not because it's, wow, look at this, but it's like at a certain point I'm wondering was it her choice? So let me go back to the folks who said it hurt things. Why do you think it hurt things?
Because it caused her to suddenly realize that it was wrong and completely shut out.
Okay, so she had a moment like, this is wrong. because of what he did. Okay, what do you guys think?
It's like they're trying to make it work, even though she has doubts that it won't. But she's like maybe trying to convince herself from what he's saying.
Yeah, he's trying to make it work, and he physically tries to force, because he's saying, what does he want to do with her? What does he keep on saying to her? Let's, what? What does he want to do? Let's get married. So if they can't get married, legally, say, he's going to force, see, I'm putting my interpretation. Somebody stop me. All right? I feel like he, physically forced her to marry him at that moment. Does that make sense, how you're looking at it? Because it doesn't seem like it was moving in that direction. But the way it's written, and I'm not going to read it out loud, but it just seems like she was like, no! No! Right? Is that how you read it? Anyone, different thoughts, different interpretations? Because I swear I'm not the king of all knowledge. I have a t-shirt that says that, but that doesn't really count. What did you see it? And again, please disagree with me. When you're reading it, are you like, go ahead. It's not romantic, is it? Does it feel? It doesn't feel romantic. It feels sad and panicked and rushed, and then she goes away and he's got his arm out like this. Which, by the way, let's think about what we know about Ishmael. What's the symbolism there with the arm out? Think back to what we know about him in the present. He doesn't have it anymore. Ooh, right. See how it all comes together. Okay. Real quick, I want to shift gears. Has anybody had a chance to look at any of this yet? I just have a quick reference point. There's one chapter in the book, How to Read Literature Like a Professor, that says, when in doubt, it's from Shakespeare, or when in doubt, it's from Shakespeare. Yeah. And I was struck by just this one point. Is there a part of this story that reminds you of a Shakespeare play?
Yeah.
Yes?
Forbidden Love, obviously.
Yes, there you go. Yes, so in the book, How to Read Like a Professor, he says that things all tie together. It will remind you of something else. So it's very much a Romeo and Juliet story in many ways, right? He says it's not always exactly the same, but you've got two kids from very different worlds who fall in love, and let's see how it works out. It's not going to be the same as Shakespeare, I can tell you that. So let's see. I got us into chapter 14 today. That brings us to. That's okay. Okay, so next class will be chapters 21 to 24. No, excuse me. 17 to 20. Yes, 17 to 20. 17, 18, 19, 20. How to Read Like a Professor, 13, 14, and 15. And that's it. Any other questions or comments, observations? How's your feel for the book? Are you liking the book? Are you not liking the book? You like it? Has anyone seen the movie? Has anyone cheated and seen the movie? Come on. No. I haven't seen it yet either. I bought it, but I haven't seen it. So you're liking it? Has anybody read ahead? No? Okay. It stays good. It stays good. Okay. All right then. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank folks from at home. Remember, Twitter, G.A.P. Great Books. We're also online on the SAU 19 website. It is faculty.sau19.org, and there's a link available off the top of my head. I don't. Faculty.sau19.org, and we have the course materials are available there, and of course, G.A.P Great Books at sau19.com is where you could send us emails. And we're going to wrap up a few minutes early so we can discuss papers. But until then, we'll see you next week.